questions.
Just let it
Just
come
tell
out.
him about your life,
All
or
right.
who you are, where you live,
Yeah.
what you do here. You ready, Wilson?
One second. Speaking of his crick is loud and clear. I like it now. That's perfect. I like that.
That's a stereo mic or
Actually, no, it's mono.
mono?
Yeah.
We'll probably talk about music. You're hearing music and where you were exposed to it.
Okay.
It's not gonna be thinking questions. It's
That's
gonna be
great.
stuff that you know.
Feel things, yeah. That's good.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. State your name.
For the record.
Okay, for the record, yeah. Okay. My name is Al Berard.
And Al, do we have permission to use your image for a video project?
Yes. Okay. As long as my clothes stays on. How's that?
All right. So, how long has your family lived in the Henderson, Cecilia area?
I grew up in this area. Yeah. I grew up in the Henderson, Cecilia area, a little place called Grand Anse, and it borders the levee of the Chafalai Basin.
Is he looking down, Wilson?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Um,
Let's just try this. Ask him more open-ended questions. Like,
like, how long is your family, like, your father and your grandfather, are they from here?
Yes, my dad was raised out here in this area, a little town called Grand Anse. It's not even on most maps. And I would feel more relaxed if I could just like look at you
Okay.
instead of looking at that
Let me get a
camera.
chair.
You know what I mean?
Talk about how long has your family lived in this area?
Okay.
And then, like,
I'll tell you what. Let me give you a little bit
But
about who I
basically,
am and all that,
you just talk and
and then you guys can.
but be specific where they lived, like they didn't
Right.
live in this type of house. What did they
Right.
live in? Did they live on the bayous?
Okay.
And those type of things.
Okay, y'all are rolling.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Al Berard. I was born in the city, but I lived here all my life. Grand Anse, Cecilia, Henderson area. Grand Anse is where I grew up. It's a little town that's bordered, touching the Chafalai Basin levee. And my dad made his living in the basin and did fur trapping and crawfishing all his life. I'm the baby of 8, so when they had me, my parents were older. They were older when I was born, and my dad only spoke French, never went to school, couldn't read or write. My mom went up to the 8th grade. Were raised real simple lives, very simple. I can remember living off the land, we had chickens, pigs, cows. We had a milk cow. I remember that very well as a young boy. I remember even picking cotton, but I was real small back then. And that's my earliest memory of my dad working in the fields. After that is when he got into the crawfishing and did all the trapping and all of his life there. For the record, I'm 44 years old, so that lets you know about how many years back that happened. My dear old parents raised us real simple, high values, Cajun, total Cajun. It's all they knew. I can remember when Interstate 10 ran through this area. It's like it brought the world to us. We were so secluded, we didn't know anything about anything else. We had a black and white TV. And I remember my dad would go outside with a monkey wrench to turn the antenna, and we'd scream out the window, "Whoa, whoa, back up!" Until he'd find the spot. That was way before cable TV made it down here. Okay, let me take a rest here.
So that was recently.
So,
And the bridge over the Chafalaya, was that also
Yeah.
built at the same time?
You record me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I'm all just. You can edit what you need, huh?
That's fine.
I can remember going on Sundays over over the swamp bridge, the Interstate 10 bridge. When it goes over the levee, it goes all the way until Grosstedt back there, Maroguin, all that, and that's before it was opened. Families would go out there with their cars and barbecue pits, and they'd all line up on that bridge. And I can remember the older guys spearing shoe pick, the fish from the top of that bridge. I mean, it was beautiful, man. The water, this was like in the very early 70s. I might have been 10 or 11 years old at the time. And I can remember looking down, and you could actually see the fish. It was amazing, man. The water was crystal clear. That's one of my earliest memories of the actual, looking down into the Basin swamp. Now, I remember going with my dad in his pirogue, a little boat there. He would take that on the other side of the levee, and he'd crawfish. He had traps out there, but he wouldn't go out way in the deep. He'd follow, I guess maybe 100, 200 yards off the levee, and he'd crawfish right there. And I can remember riding with him in the pirogue, doing that.
When did he start crawfishing? Like crawfishing didn't become an industry until
Right.
recently.
Well, what I remember of crawfishing in our area is there was Ami's store. I don't know if y'all familiar with that. It's in Henderson, near Pat's Fisherman's Wharf and all that. There's a store there. It was called Joe Ami's, and he used to have a handful of women that would peel crawfish tails, and I'm still talking about that early time when I was 10, 11, 1970, and I'm sure it was before that even, but that's when I remember going there, and I'd see these women peeling the crawfish tails, and believe it or not, they would export those tails, and I don't know where they were sending them to, but I remember, my dad, we'd eat crawfish, Lord, so many times at home, and back then it was like, crawfish. It wasn't like a, big thing like it is now. It's like,
Yeah, how'd you cook the crawfish?
my mom used to cook it with a stew, put a little bit of roux, she'd get a brown gravy, and oh man, that was so good. And also she'd do etouffee, but mostly we ate it in a stew, like a crab stew. Well, that's the same thing, but with the crawfish tails.
So you weren't boiling them or anything?
No, we'd boil them once in a while, but to us, boiling crawfish was wasting, It's like, man, it was so good to have a rice and gravy and that crawfish,
1 second, I'm going to position this mic a little bit better because
All
it's
right.
picking up the traffic noise here.
Oh, okay.
Use this.
Am I doing all right for y'all?
Oh, it's
yeah,
awesome.
you're doing
Yeah.
wonderful.
What y'all want?
That thing about the interstate's interesting.
Yeah, I have more about that too.
Yeah. I want you to talk about, of course, back then, before this bridge was built, you remember that very well, which was
Oh, yeah.
in the 70s.
Well, like the future
Baton
generations just
Baton Rouge was
take it-
considered a world
Oh,
away.
yeah,
To
man.
get from here to Baton Rouge would take
All day.
all day
But
long.
like the present and the future generations just take the bridge for granted.
Right.
They don't
'Cause it's so
realize
quick,
that they don't realize it didn't used to be there.
Right.
Do you know anything about the railroad that used to be there?
Yeah. I know a lot about that town. I know a lot about when you go over the Chafalaya Basin where it's clear and we call it beautiful now. At the time it was like desolate, man. That's when all the logging companies came in and they cut down all these big cypress trees. And I don't think they left one tree behind, man. These things were huge. And my friend Greg can tell you more about that. He studied some of that, some of that stuff about the trees.
And when you talk about places, be specific where exactly they were.
Okay.
Is it better?
That's fine.
Well, I was I guess the sun-
I'm talking about, as a matter of fact, we're going to take some shots of that,
Yeah.
the Chafalaya, we take it for granted because we see it every day when we get on that bridge, that whole area where McGee's Landing and all that, where it's clear, it looks clear, but you see stumps that have been cut. That's logging companies came in there. My daddy, he worked out there, and I don't even remember when they did that. He was probably a young man, 19, 20, 25 years old. I don't know, you know. When the logging company came in there and they cut down all these big cypress trees, my dad, they went in there and they worked for $1 a day, man. And they used to have to carry through the water these logs, you know, on their shoulders. Hey! Okay.
How old was your dad in 1920? Was he young?
Okay.
Really young?
Oh man, you're gonna have to help me figure this out.
He
Okay.
had to have been a little kid.
Huh? Yeah. Oh, I wasn't born.
Well,
You know.
I hope not.
Oh, you said he had to be a little kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh yeah. He was. Well, he died in '85, and he was 71 at the
Okay.
time. So that's about the only age I know. I don't keep up with all the birthday stuff. But
But talk about your grandfather.
yeah. And
He lived out here too?
yeah, my grandmother is the one that I knew. You know. My dad's mom. She lived right on the bayou that I'm gonna take you guys on. It's a little bayou that runs into the Ami Bayou, and they were raised right on there. My dad, you know, he was like the oldest of their family, and he helped support that family as well. You know, as a young man, they used to go out there and pick pick moss in the swamp, and they'd sell that, you know. And when I think about that, it just breaks my heart, you know, because him and his old mom were, you know, out there and picking that moss with all the you know, the snakes. And when you think about that, man, that was a hard life, yeah, you know.
Did he ever talk about that?
It was stuff he didn't really want to talk about, you know. I guess it was so hard for them. Later in his life, he did tell me some of the things, you know, about their upbringing. Yeah, the old man had a pretty hard time there. But,
Well, I've noticed that a lot of the older generations, like, they didn't used to talk to their kids about the past, and they didn't tell about any of those things.
it's true, man. I don't know why. Maybe it was things they wanted to forget. I don't know. Maybe it was that hard for them or whatever it was.
What was the usual profession? Like, for example, you grew up in the Basin. What did most people do to earn a living out here, and what do they do today?
At that time, me growing up, all the people around me, I knew them as fishermen and crawfishermen and farmers. You know, it wasn't a big industry like it is now. The sugar cane. It was more. I can remember the old guys with their wagons and mules pulling wagon loads of corn, and basically that corn would support that farm. You know, it would feed the animals. You know, they would grow probably just enough corn to feed the animals. You know, on the farm, chickens, cows, pigs. But a lot of the living was made off of the swamp, you know, of fishing in this area. My father-in-law, he did a lot of stuff. He was like maybe 20 years younger than my dad, and he at that time they were starting to build houses around here, and he started laying bricks, you know. So it was stuff like that mostly around this area.
When did people start moving out to, like, this area, was
Right.
this considered the highlands?
To me, growing up, I grew up in Grand Anse, and it's about 3 or 4 miles from here. Well, we always considered Cecilia like the city. You know, it's funny. And this is Cecilia, and we have a high school. I mean, that's about it. We have a Piggly Wiggly now. And back then, it was, I remember the roads being gravel, you know, all these roads here. Until the four-way stop. We all came through there, it was gravel. Yeah.
When did they pave it over?
And that was in the 70s. A lot of stuff happened in the 70s, you know, around here. The Interstate 10, getting back to that.
Talk about the whole development. Like, when did this whole area start getting developed?
When Interstate 10 cut through here,
What did they do? Like, say,
it brought the world to us, man. We
well,
didn't.
so say, you know, in the '70s, they built Interstate 10. They started developing subdivisions and
Hmm.
houses. Is that what they did?
Yeah. In the early 1970s, they started developing more around here, this area. And a big thing about that helped develop that was Interstate 10 coming through the area. It started off just like everywhere else around Interstate 10. You'd have a one filling station, and it branched off. I mean that's for business wise. The homes were, I mean, as people would have families and kids, then just it starts from there. I mean, uh, where we grew up there, I remember the nearest neighbor was maybe a half a mile from us. You know, and that's how it was. But now, it's becoming smaller and smaller. The area, people are moving in closer to each other. Population, man. Um, Getting back, I want to share something with y'all about Interstate 10. We used to go out there on Sundays and just as kids we'd run around up on the bridge. That's before it was open. They were still working on it. And
How did you get up on it? I don't quite
huh?
understand that.
You could ride. It was there, but there were barricades. We'd go around them. And that's Interstate 10. They were just laying down the dirt, you know. And also another thing I remember is going all the way from here, all the way to Holly Beach on Interstate 10 before it was open, and that was illegal. But we'd see people, going on. It was all dirt, and I remember we'd pray that it wouldn't rain, because if it would rain, man, you were in trouble. You'd get stuck. I remember that as a kid going to Holly Beach before Interstate 10 was open. It's strange, huh?
So a lot of people did that.
Ah, we met up with a few cars that time we went. I mean, not crazy, not over, you know. Um, They, I remember they had it like fenced in, all of the interstate. I mean, you had to work to get on there. I remember them probably cutting the wires and getting on. Ooh. My brother-in-law, he was a character. Another story I want to share with y'all about the fishing. Um, this was a friend of mine in Henderson. We were kids, growing up, and it was still around that time. Those are memories that I cherish, man. That time in my life, 10, 11 years old, were magical for me as a kid. Um, we would take the levee in a truck, and his dad, the guy's dad, his name is Warren, my friend. His dad, Fred, who has passed away, Fred Hayes. He used to buy crawfish from these fishermen that lived out in Bayou Benoit. And Bayou Benoit was like, man, there was nothing. For miles and miles, you would drive on this levee and go until you'd finally meet up with one camp or something along the side of that levee. And we'd stop and buy the crawfish. Well, can you imagine two kids, 10 and 11 years old, driving a truck? That's how it was back then. We'd drive all the way out there. Take us all day, man. We would come back to bring the crawfish back. There was hardly any room. We'd have to drive 10 miles an hour coming back. This truck was so loaded with sacks of crawfish. We would load it, the whole back end, the hood. We'd just keep a place just so he could see. The top of the whole thing, man. As much as we could pile on that truck. That's how much crawfish we'd bring back. And I haven't seen that in a long time, you know. Remember going in the basin, they had so much crawfish and the water would get bad. The crawfish would climb, man, on the trees, man, coming out to get oxygen. You'd see them on tree stumps, man. It was beautiful. I remember that's stuff I haven't seen in years in the basin. Okay, am I talking too much, bro?
Oh no, keep on talking.
I mean, also, let me stop real quick. Just so check the documentaries about the interstate and
But
how isolation
but it
changed.
was
That's a
also,
good thing.
but also,
It's a good starting thing
Yeah, definitely.
for the swamp, you know.
what you
Yeah.
were saying about the interstate was it was the first time you got to see the basin from up high.
Exactly.
You never
We always-
realized,
I
you
only
never
saw it-
realized what you were living in.
I
until
only
you,
saw it from a pirogue, from a boat, when I went with my dad in there.
So tell me what you think about isolation before and after the Interstate 10.
I love it. I love it both. I mean, I yearn for those days that I know. I yearn for the days that I know I'll never see again, and that was the seclusion of our culture and our people. You know, it was so beautiful. We didn't even, and I didn't realize. You know, you don't realize it. You know, at the time. But in the same breath, I think that the interstate has helped this area. It's brought us jobs. It brought a lot of our people in this area jobs, and it makes it easier to get to, you know, to jobs and stuff. It's definitely it had a big change. It affected this area totally, and positive and negative. You know, I would put it as probably as a balanced thing. You know,
like your way of life is easier.
yeah,
Like you don't
Easier,
have to
but-
struggle like you don't have
yeah.
to go out and hunt your dinner every day.
right. Yeah, I mean, you can go to the store and get it now, which is, there's nothing like a homegrown raised hen or a chicken, no matter what anybody says. You know, you go and grab it and you eat that thing. That it tastes like, oh man, it's you know it's amazing. I mean, we live so fast now.
Well, my dad, you know, he grew up in Baton Rouge,
Uh-huh.
and he was telling me stories the other day. There were certain people that lived where he lived that would have to go out and hunt birds,
Wow.
and like just when they were just building subdivisions, they had a lot of forests around.
Mhm.
This is the 50s, but they were going out and hunting their dinner every night, and that's in Baton Rouge.
That's something, man. Oh, many times, my friend. I remember that.
So
You
talk
good?
about
You wanna do something?
Yeah, why don't you talk about real quick? Just we don't. keep
That's
much
a
longer.
good topic, man.
Yeah, that's a good topic
I was
too.
raised with that same thing, man.
About hunting for your food.
Oh, yes,
yeah,
bro.
like getting your food every
Oh,
day.
man.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about catching these bullfrogs you'll go after?
The frogs. My friend Keith there. He's a champ. I'm gonna get you guys to hook up with him. Frogs, turtles. You know, at night you go. There's a season now in frogging. Go out there with a spotlight, and now you just catch them by hand. We used to use a pole, you know, that would kind of like snap. I forget what they call them, but but now you just drive up with you spot the frog. Someone sits up front in the boat, you know. You're spotting that frog, and he kind of freezing. You just grab it by hand.
Yeah, we definitely will check that out. We want to go out with them one night.
Oh, yeah.
When did they start doing that?
I'm not sure when the season is on the frogs right now.
No, but like when did the whole like who
Oh,
came up with the
always.
You
idea?
can
Of,
remember, huh? Yeah.
Always, man.
but who came up with the idea of shining? I guess that came with portable batteries.
Well, you know, Cajuns are known for that headlight. You know, it's kind of like outlawing, you know.
Yeah, using their resources. Yeah.
But back then, man, it was survival, man.
Mhm.
You know,
you use what you had. Huh?
you use what you had, man. You know, we ate so many robins and blackbirds and grosbecs, everything that's illegal. What they're gonna? But we didn't waste a thing, man. That's what we ate. There were no stores where you could go buy chicken or tofu or whatever the heck you want to eat. You know, it was all about let's eat, man. You know.
How did you cook those birds?
We cooked them every way, every which way. A stew, you know, gumbo, and today everybody hears jambalaya as a meal. To us back then, jambalaya wasn't a meal. It was the leftovers. That's what jambalaya was back then for us as kids. You take the bottom of the pot of the rice, and that's usually the best part, huh? When it's kind of black in the bottom there. Scrape all that, throw what's left in there, stir it all up, man, and that was a jambalaya for us.
We're to stop right there. picture on my computer. What's
Yeah,
his
Blair.
name? Blair.
Uh-huh.
And his first language was French, I say, and he
Yeah.
speaks perfect French.
Yeah.
You know, and he's from this area, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the guys I want to talk
To me, he's like the last one that
Yeah.
I know in the generation, you know, the age.
What I would like you to talk about real quick, and we'll have to mic you different or something, because AC. But I want you to talk about how the isolationism in the French language, why it seems to have lasted longer out here in the Basin, whereas everywhere else it seems to have been quickly
Yeah.
taken care of. It's quickly taken out of the picture. Why French? Why are there still young people that are speaking the first language is French even today, in the the 21st century? That's
Yeah.
I'd like you to mention something about that.
Like
How come there are people, young people, still, like, what's his name again?
Blair.
Blair, who are speaking, what's his whole name?
Scrantz.
Blair
Scrantz. German name, bro.
German name. Okay, people like this, why is it that there are people that exist that are still so young speaking French as a first language, but it seems that everywhere else, it was so quickly taken away.
That's interesting that you brought that up, you know. I think that it has, to me, the only way I can explain that, it would be just the environment maybe, or you know, it's like we finally have a Walmart, you know, in our area. I mean, it seems as though we're always the last ones to maybe to catch on, you know, or whatever in this area. And to me, it's just because it's away from the cities, you know, and right on the edge of that basin, that swamp area. Man, that's a hard one to answer, man.
Well,
I really don't know how to answer that.
you know why it is? Because economics. Companies don't move into the area they can't make money.
Right.
So maybe what you want to talk about is you know, what kind of money is this area making? What
Yeah.
you know?
It's this whole Atchafalaya area. People know it. I've always thought of it as kind of a poor area. You know,
Right.
like the pictures you usually see of these people living on these little wooden shacks and eating, like you said, robins and eating eating frogs. You know,
So
it's not
talk about
exactly
people
it's not
didn't have
exactly
any
really
money.
high class meals.
Right,
Talk
right.
about somewhat because it's the lower class people that are still speaking the French. Seems to me. What do you? Not to patronize them.
No.
Well, I think it's because people didn't have any money, and so like a grocery store never wanted to build here because nobody would have gone there to shop. They wouldn't have had any money, and so they would have gone out of business.
Right.
And so it was the poverty of the area, I guess.
I
But then
would-
it was people's resistance. They just lived off the land. They didn't.
I think it's more of the resistance, man, of not wanting to do that other life or whatever. A lot of it is that too. You know, I think it would probably go half and half. You know, where they're proud of back here, man. These are tough people, man. You know, they are poor. Many of them are poor, but those that have wanted that other life have chosen to leave. You know, chosen to go work in these big oil field. You know, a lot of it is oil field related. You know, around here. That's usually the only place you could get a job back then, was to get on. My brothers, my two older brothers are riverboat captains. They've been doing that since they're 15, 16 years old, you know, and one of my brothers is almost 60 now, you know. So it shows you how they left young, you know, and they chose that way, you know. But I think you're right too, in maybe the poverty in the area. A lot of people, the education was a lot of them didn't go to school, man, you know, or when they went to school didn't learn that well, or I don't know what it is, you know. But and I'm not saying it in a cutting down my people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that that's the way it is, man. That's Walter Cronkite would say it, you know, and that's the way it is. I mean, we can analyze this till we're blue in the face, you know, and we don't know. I remember going to school in the first week in my first week in school, man, crying all day long, bro, sitting on my teacher's lap and crying, because I thought I was in another world. I didn't understand a single kid, you know, and finally I met a friend who his dad was the assessor in St. Martin Parish, and we became lifelong friends. That first week of school, when the day we'd get to school, we'd take our shoes off. That was it, man. Take the shoe. We we were so not used to wearing shoes, you know, and take our shoes off. And I remember this kid. He was the only one that could speak French. Not only one, but the one that took the time maybe to talk to me. I didn't understand anybody else really, the English.
About how old were you when you started learning English?
Well, you know, then I really started learning in school. You know, my mom spoke a little English around the house, but it was mostly French. You know, my mom spoke English well. She went to school until the 8th grade. But that first year was tough. I remember in school.
How did you get to school?
By the bus. Bus would pick us up.
So the bus would go over to
We lived down a little dead end road.
Was it this school? Was it here in Cecilia?
It was, yeah, it was further down. The school it's still there. The school, yeah, a little school. You know, we went through so many times out here, man. I remember when the blacks and whites started going to school. I'm sure y'all do too, huh? Or y'all too young for that?
My school was always white. The blacks and whites are still segregated.
Wow. I remember that. That was some pretty intense times, man. For everybody, the teachers. Can you imagine the teachers? Black and white teachers. It was intense for them.
So
you know?
So they were having to deal with the black and white thing and the French and
Oh,
English
everything,
thing?
yeah. And we all spoke the same French, the blacks and whites down here. They call it Creole. I don't know if it's Creole, but we call it le français cassé. It's like it's broken French, you know. It's the way we speak French out here. Now, if you go down the road to Orneville, to me they sing when they speak French. Beautiful French, you know. All right, am I talking too much?
Oh, no, that's good. Actually, I think that's going to be in there. Just because we have so many audio problems right now and all this stuff.
Okay, we'll come back because
I hope this is helping y'all.
We'll just have this. Like, how many kids were there where you were living that were speaking French? Were they coming to school, or like, were a lot of the kids not going to school?
A lot of the kids were speaking French. And you're right about that too. I remember
but
kids.
But that was a problem for all these kids, or
I don't know. I just know it was a problem for me. You know, maybe they could speak English. I don't even remember. It was. All I remember is me struggling that first year in school, man. It was.
But why were you going? Did they make you go to school? Or?
Well, I mean, you know, all kids go to school, so.
But when did they start mandating that everybody had to go to school? Like, 'cause your dad, you know, didn't.
Yeah. I have some cousins that had quit school in early grades to go and work, you know, with the. I guess maybe it's probably when I got into the elementary, or maybe they started mandating that. I don't remember. But I do remember.
Like, when did it become an option where it really wasn't like
you had to go to
school? Not too many people dropped out. Like, it used to be a lot of people used to
would
drop out.
Yeah.
And when did that all change?
I guess when I was in junior high, 1974, maybe 75, something like that. Something like that. Because I graduated high school in '78, and I remember it was unheard of for kids to quit, man. You know, the later years, you know, in the '80s. But
well, now if you quit, you're sort of like the flunky or something. You're a deviant, but like in your day,
isn't that strange?
Why were people quitting school?
Yeah, a lot of them couldn't learn. First of all, it was a problem. You know, they couldn't learn, man. They couldn't learn how to read or write. And I know a bunch of them that are like that in this area, and they're some of the most incredibly talented people I've ever met, with their hands on operating machinery that no school can teach you, man. You know? And, yeah. That's a good question.
They couldn't learn because they were raised in like a French family?
I think a lot of the people back then just didn't have education, you know. My dad didn't. He couldn't read or write. I remember it used to break my heart as a little boy. I'd swing on our front swing where I was raised in the front yard, and the postman would drop our mail off in a box, and I remember seeing my dear old daddy going to the post office box, and he couldn't read or write, but he'd look at the pictures, you know, or he knew what envelopes were coming from where, you know,
They-
like a something, huh?
I remember, I've heard a story. There was a blues guy
Uh-huh.
that was illiterate, and this manager who was from the north came and he was talking about this blues guy, and he says, well, he lived in this isolated world, and he was sort of imprisoned by his illiteracy by like the 70s and stuff.
Right.
How do you think illiteracy imprisoned some of the people there?
Embarrassment. That's how it imprisons you. I mean, you don't want to face the world, man. You feel as though you don't fit in. Really think about it from their level, from their point of view.
So you think that was probably part of the Cajun resistance
That could be.
because of pride, but they
I don't know if
resisted it.
it's pride, man.
Well, it could have been pride for that
You know?
they didn't want people to realize this, but they were
Yeah.
really embarrassed by
Yeah. Maybe
that
it was
fact
pride.
that they couldn't
Yeah.
learn quickly.
They couldn't learn, or they never learned, or never, you know. And it's like that's the way it was back then. You know, it was all about survival, man. You know, it's just even today. That's the way it is, man. You know, it depends on where you're born. You know, it's some are born in a family that is, you know, they know how to function better, or how to make money, or have money, or, you know, it's a little easier maybe, whereas there's some people that just weren't born with that, or I don't know what you'd call it, you know.
Well, they had their own skills that but it didn't assimilate with the new trends
Right.
of how life was going to be and
Right.
is. Same's happening now. Technology
It
is
keeps
isolated.
going, yeah.
You know,
Another group of people, yeah.
like,